Good morning. Well, we have traveled the world today to look at 2050, and we were just in Norway. Let's turn now next door to Sweden. I think this goes, Matt, into the category of when things go a little bit weird. Today in Sweden, 4,000 people got up and got out of bed to go to work with a chip implanted in their hand. It's about the size of a grain of rice. It fits right here between the thumb and the forefinger. And for those people, they replaced their house keys. They didn't need keys today. The chip replaced their Metro card and their train ticket, and it replaced their employee badge when they got to work. In fact, I was surprised to learn the other day that the entire railway system of Sweden is outfitted to handle these human microchips. It's kind of astonishing. So if we're going to think about the world in 2050, there's a guy in Sweden we need to meet. His name is Johan Esterlund, and he's the CEO and founder of a company called Biohacks. He manufactures and implants all of those biochips in his fellow Swedes, and he's been working with companies and governments all around the world. We have him coming to us live today from Sweden. There we go. Good morning, Johan. Can you hear us?
Hi, Carolyn.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us. He's sitting in his home right outside Stockholm this morning. Give me a second just to introduce you a little bit more. Johan is a trade association head, like many of you. He is the president of the Swedish Association of Professional Piercers, as in tattoos and body piercing. And it turns out that was great background for what he does now in his company. He married up his tech background and his piercing background to really become the leader in the Nordic countries on microchipping. So hello and thank you. I've got a couple of questions for the audience that will get us level set. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you in this room have a wearable, like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit? Wow, okay, gosh, that's like half the room. Okay. How many of you know someone with a pacemaker or an implantable defibrillator? And we're comfortable with that. Okay, that's also about half the room. All right, the third and last question. If you have a pet, is your pet microchipped? The dog and cat people? All right, again, that seems like half the room. Well, listen, with that in mind, let's think about those technologies and when they were first introduced, how long did it take us to get comfortable? And as Matt talked about and others, are we going to go to a world where augmentation and information on your personal body might be required for work or might be required for travel? We've got someone here to talk to us about it today. We found him through a lot of media coverage. He's been covered in Time Magazine. He's been on CNN. He's talked to folks at Davos. And he's agreed to come today. He couldn't be here live. But let's go. Johan, tell us, what's the 101? What are the basics on how these chips are inserted? How much does it hurt? Can you get them out? How much do they cost? Give us the 101.
Well, it's based on NFC technology, the exact same technology you'd see in cashless vending machines and passports. And it's about the size of a grain, about $150 to $200, depending. We try and follow the Big Mac index. And it's not harder than getting your ear pierced. And it's easy to remove if you get sick of it.
Wow, okay, so it's the equivalent of read-only documents is what you told me on the phone the other day. But if 4,000 people in Sweden have done this, is there something cultural? What is it about the Swedish society that has made that country so accepting of these biochips?
Well, I'd say one, we spend 9 months out of the year indoors inventing stuff. We're a perfect breeding ground for technology. I mean, we did create Skype, the music streaming platform, Spotify, Sony Ericsson, one of the first and biggest mobile phone operators. And I just guess we have kind of a high trust in our government, and we're not afraid of it being taken advantage of.
It's interesting. I think we have a different situation here with all of our concerns about data privacy. We'll talk about that in a second. But here's a question that probably many people in this room are asking, which is, aren't wearables enough, or even fingerprints? Why do we need to go to having something foreign like that implanted in our bodies?
Well, you'll never get up to immutable ID with a wearable. And I guess if you take it into account, the value you want to push, like we just bought 5% from Icon Gold Reserve. They're a company that made a cryptocurrency based in gold. So you can literally move metric tons of gold in sub-seconds and immutably identify the ones doing it. So just the financial sector part, where you reduce transaction times and interaction times with up to 90%, should be well enough to get it. And that you can get rid of your car keys and house keys and all of the plastic cards you carry around.
So if I have a chip implanted, do I decide what to load onto my chip?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just with an app or a platform, you decide to go fully incognito, just use it for your door lock and your one of these padlocks, if you will, or a secret wine cellar, or you just use it for commercial purposes, travel, plane tickets, loyalty cards, and self-checkout in the cafeteria.
Well, we've identified really 3 use cases that Johan is working on. The first one, as he described, is for individuals who want the convenience of not losing their house keys again or getting on the train more quickly. But the second interesting one is employers. There are several companies in different countries around the world, including here in the US, who've offered microchipping to their employees on a voluntary basis, of course, to replace an ID badge, as I mentioned, to pay for things in the company cafeteria, maybe to gain access to a secure part of the company. But the third use case that Johan has been working on with a few countries is governments and first responders. So you can imagine being able to quickly identify a dementia patient who may have wandered, or a child that's been lost, certainly refugees at the border who may have no identity papers and need and benefit from that immutable identity. And people have also been imagining a world in the next couple of decades where governments could use biochips to protect national security documents and other information. So I think we're just on the cusp of this with those 4,000 or so in Sweden. But Johan, tell us, how soon will we see this in the United States?
Well, it's not really new. It was invented in the States in 1984, 85 by Jerry Thunberg. And back in 2004, your FDA approved a microchip that was paired and associated with a social security number for first responders to be able to instantly identify blood group and counterindications or allergies for patients. I mean, the infrastructure is already there. If in Sweden, if a horse gets hit in the street, first responders would scan it and they'd instantly know everything. Medical history, daddy horse and mama horse, and everything in between. If I lose my wallet and I get picked up in the street and I don't have any ID, I'm a John Doe. So having that digital voice can actually save lives.
Well, with that in mind, you had a question you wanted to ask the audience. I think this might be a non-shipping crowd, but why don't you go ahead and ask?
Well, I mean, with a little bit of imagination going forward, who of you would opt in to get a microchip to boost your wallet and keys, and maybe even have it as an opt-in for your employees?
Wow, that's interesting, pretty surprising. Maybe Maybe a third of the room. All right, I'm surprised, but this is giving faith because there's another question at the end of this about who's going to step up to do this.
I really wish I could be there.
Well, you know, as we all know, data privacy is one of the most contentious issues that we face, certainly here in the United States. And our legislators are trying to keep up. The Chamber, in fact, over the last couple of months has brought together about 200 companies around the table to draft model legislation on that very topic. And our Technology Engagement Center recently delivered that to the Hill. And Axios reported just this past weekend in a new poll that almost 60% of Americans say that the protection of their privacy and protection of their data has reached a crisis point. So let me ask you about what's the regulatory and legislative environment that you see happening for microchips, certainly in Europe where you are in the EU, but also in other parts of the world?
I'd say we're kind of working in a regulatory gray zone right now. So we're really trying to promote a beneficial regulatory framework to promote this technology, because we do see the awesomeness of it. It has such incredible potential that really unparalleled in several segments. I'd say I worked with regulation and legislation in the piercing industry for almost 15 years. And while doing this, we've gotten way further in basically 6 months, which shows the commercial interest in pushing this forward. If you look at Sweden, for instance, I mean, we're going for cashless 2023, and the commercial interest in getting rid of both cards and banknotes are huge. I mean, already we're down from 109 billion to 45 billion in notes in less than a decade, and we do only less than 1% of transactions in banknotes and coins. So the interest is there, but we really do need a robust and secure platform to prove that there will be full and sturdy protection of integrity and data privacy.
Has the EU gotten involved in microchip and privacy regulation that affects you?
Well, I'd say my best friend is the GDPR. So GDPR is a really, really strong regulation dictating exactly how data is allowed to be migrated. With our platform, though, no one can ever move, sell, or use your data without you explicitly giving consent and authorizing.
Well, that's certainly something that we talk a lot about in this country. There's a company that you've been working with in Wisconsin, up in northern Wisconsin, and Johan worked with them last year. They've currently got 85 of 200 employees who are chipped. They're using it mostly for office access and for print jobs, but they expect that more and more people in this company and in that town will be signing up for that soon. In Arkansas and Maryland, in the past couple of months, state legislatures have passed bills talking about how employers can or cannot microchip employees. And what's interesting is that no companies in those states are yet chipping, but those legislators said that they were so concerned about getting ground rules in place early that they took those steps. Are there any countries that you're working with, national governments or international organizations that are coming to you?
Yeah, I mean, several. Just the other week, I had representatives from Japanese Railways come over to get a private presentation on how our ecosystem could impact Japanese infrastructure in a good way. That, along with NTT and Recruit Investment for looking over the possibilities for the Tokyo Olympics 2020. Some I don't talk a lot with because their history kind of carries a bit more controversy. I was offered a direct line into the Chinese government from another company we were discussing with, and I'm not entirely sure that user and integrity and data privacy is in their biggest interest, so I turned that down as friendly as I could.
Wait, the sound skipped out there for a minute. Did you say the Chinese government?
Yeah, Chinese
Okay.
government.
And what about Russia? Have the Russians been calling your number?
Yeah, a couple of times. So they have this mobile company with 200 million users, 197 million users to be exact. They wanted to interview me on exactly how everything worked and how ready I was to start implementing in Russia. And again, you know, I do favor choice and democracy and kind of free will. So we ended that conversation.
That was that. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left. Let me close out by asking, how will this be different in 2050? I mean, if you went to 4,000 users in Sweden and you know, probably 1,000 more around the world in just your first 18 months, what's it going to look like in 2050?
I'd say technology, since technology already started moving into the body for novelty and just effectiveness in your everyday interactions with your digital surroundings, I'd say 30 years from now, it's more a conversation on what type of implant you have, because depending on what type of job or what type of sports or you're interested in, I'd say we'd be hyper-connected and informed about our body's status in real time if you chose to. And that alone would save trillions annually in just preventing cardiovascular disease.
So you mean the early warning systems of health? Is that one of the areas you're working in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one of the most interesting ones, because if you kind of get a couple of pointers before it goes south really fast, you don't have to end up in a really bad place.
All right. Well, he really wanted to be with us today. He just couldn't get here from Sweden on this particular trip. But he's told me a couple of stories that pretty much every time he talks to a group like ours, everyone kind of laughs a little bit and says, gee, I wonder. But then people come up to him privately afterward and say, how does it work exactly? Maybe I could try a chip. And he just gave a presentation to some executives at PwC. And afterward, the head of Europe for the firm approached him and said, you know, I think I'd like to give us a try. And so now that guy's chipped. It's how he gets into his office each day. So Johan, can we just decide now that you'll come back a year from now and do a live demo?
Oh, you just say the word. Either.
All right, well, it won't be me, I can promise you that. But maybe we'll have some brave soul here. Actually, we had a few more people than I would have anticipated who might try it. So you can think about it over the course of the next several months, and maybe we'll have what they call in Sweden these chipping parties, where people get together and get chipped all at the same time. And you'll be here for that, right?
Oh, definitely. It'd be my honor.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for calling in from Sweden.
Thank you very much.